In today's video, we're going to finish up the book of Genesis. But first, please click the subscribe button and click the bell icon so you can be notified when we release new videos. Also, if you like this video, please like it and share it with some friends that need to hear this. So, in the first video, we observed Genesis chapters 1 through 11, which established the main narrative in the Bible. God has created everything and has created humans according to his image, so that they can govern the world for his sake. Humans choose to commit the wrong path and rebelled, and the world spiraled out of control, causing violence and death, all leading to the uprising and the scattering of people living in Babylon. The big issue is, what is God planning to accomplish to save and redeem his creation? From that scattering in Babylon, the writer traces the lineage of a single family, which eventually leads to a man called Abram, who later became known as Abraham. The promise of God to Abraham at the start of the chapter 12 begins the possibility of a new storyline in the narrative. God tells Abraham to leave his home and move to the land of Canaan that God promises will be all his someday. In that land, God promises to make Abraham into a nation of great strength and to bless him and make his name great. The promises of God are now linked with earlier portions of the Bible. Then Babylon was arrogantly trying to establish a good name for itself, and it did not go well. However, God in his mercy will give a great name to this no-name guy named Abraham. And God's blessing on Abraham is echoed throughout the ages, all the way back to the blessing God gave humanity at the beginning. The question is, why is God going to bless Abraham and his family? The final line of God's promise makes it evident, so that all the families of the earth will find God's blessing in you. This is crucial for understanding the other biblical narrative. God's purpose is to save and bless the world he has created through Abraham's family. This is the reason why the remaining Old Testament story is just focused on one family. This family will be later referred to as the people of Israel. This is why Israel will be later referred to as the kingdom of the priest of Mount Sinai. God intends to make them visible to all the nations who he is, and this is ultimately the promise picked up by the subsequent prophets and poets from the Bible who claim that the fulfillment of this promise will be through the Messiah of Israel, who will bring peace and justice to all nations. As of this moment in the story, nothing of this is obvious. It's just a matter of watching the story unfold. The rest of the book is devoted to Abraham along with his extended family. It begins with Abraham himself, and then his son Isaac, then his son Jacob, and finally Jacob's 12 sons. The story that tell about each generation and unified by two common themes. First, every generation of Abraham's clan is one of failure after failure. They keep making wrong choices that ruin lives and puts God's promises in doubt. However, God continues to be his faithfulness to them. God continues to rescue the people from themselves, and then reaffirming his promise to bless them and the nations with them despite their failures. The Abraham stories are a good example of this. God promised Abraham an enormous family. However, on 2 occasions, the man is scared for his life. Because men he is afraid of are attracted to his wife, Abraham denies being married to her, and as you can imagine, this causes major problems. Not only that, Abraham and his wife Sarah aren't able to have children. Therefore, Sarah plans for Abraham to have sex with one of the servant girls, This causes even more problems within the family. However, each time God helps Abraham out, and in chapters 15 and 17, God even formally confirms his agreement with Abraham by a formal commitment known as a covenant. This is a classic scene. God asks Abraham to gaze at the night sky and then to count them. He says, "That's how many your family will be." In spite of all chances, not having children, and no means of having one at present, Abraham looks up at the sky and in faith in the word of the God. And God responds by entering into an agreement with Abraham and promises that he would become the father of many nations and that God's blessings will be felt throughout the entire world. And after that, God demanded Abraham to signify his family with a mark of the covenant, which was circumcision of all males within the family. This is a symbol to remind them that the prosperity of their families is a blessing from God. This is why Abraham is blessed with a large number of children in the end, and he passes away in good health. The Jacob stories explore these themes in more dramatic way. From the beginning, Jacob lives up to the meaning of his name, which means deceiver. He robs his brother Esau of his blessing and inheritance, and then he is able to do it by tricking his father, who was blind for a long time. Then Jacob just disappears. He then takes 4 wives, although he truly only has one love, Rachel, and this creates the rivalries that exist in the family. The one thing that truly is a source of shame for Jacob is the fact that he has been misled by Laban, his uncle, who cheats Jacob out of decades of his life. The tables are changed, so it's a humbled Jacob who returns to his home country. In a truly bizarre tale, Jacob finds himself wrestling with God when he asks that God give him blessings. Some things never change, right? But God recognizes his determination and gives Abraham's blessings to Jacob, and then changes his name to Israel, meaning wrestles with God. The final chapter of the book is the tale of Jacob's sons, where all the themes come to a head. Jacob loved his second, the youngest child, Joseph, more than the other children, and so he gives Joseph a very special jacket. The 10 older sons begin to dislike Joseph, and they take Joseph and they're planning to kill him. However, they end up deciding instead to simply sell him to slavery in Egypt, where he eventually is thrown into prison. Talk about a dysfunctional family, right? However, God will be with Joseph, and he manages Joseph's release from jail, and Pharaoh decides to elevate Joseph to the rank of second in command over the whole of Egypt. This is how Joseph helps the people of Egypt during a time of severe hunger and ends up helping his brothers and family from dying of starvation. So, once more, we are able to see the foolishness and sins of Abraham's family, but it is amidst God's mercy who transforms even the sins of their brothers to save their lives. This is what Joseph states at the close of the book. He tells his brothers, "You planned this for evil, but God planned it for good, to save many lives." The words are located at the conclusion of the book, as they provide a summary of not only the tale about Joseph along with his siblings, but also the book in general. Beginning with Genesis 3 onward, humans are always selfish and doing wrong, but God will not leave the world to its own devices. He is faithful and others regardless of their shortcomings. This is evident in the way the mysterious claim regarding the descendant of that woman is developed throughout the book. So remember, Genesis 3, God said that the wounded victor will come to crush the serpent and stop evil from its source. The author links this promise directly to the stories of Abraham. This is part of how God will bless all nations. From Abraham, this promise is connected to Judah, who is the fourth child of Jacob. This is the way a very important poem is found in chapter 49 in regards to an elder Jacob who is lying in his deathbed and he wishes to bless his 12 sons. And when he comes to Judah, Jacob predicts that Judah will be the leader of Israel, and that eventually there will be a king to command the obedience of all nations and fulfill God's promise to restore the blessings of the garden to all of earth. Then, after Jacob passes away, and a short time later Joseph dies. This growing family remains in Egypt, however. Genesis ends. Genesis closes with all the future promises and hopes not being fulfilled and left undeveloped. It requires you to flip the pages to find out how the story will unfold. However, for the moment, that's the book of Genesis. Before we end this, let's look at some things. The author of the book of Genesis is not identified. Traditionally, the author has always been assumed to have been Moses. There is no conclusive reason to deny that Moses authored the Genesis. As of the date of the writing, the book of Genesis does not state when it was written. The date of authorship is likely between 1440 and 1400 BC, between the time Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and then his death. As of the purpose of writing, the book of Genesis has sometimes been called the seed plot of the entire Bible. Most of the major doctrines in the Bible were introduced in seed form in the book of, like it is all throughout the book of Genesis. Along with the fallen man, God promises salvation or redemption is recorded in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. As we have already done, the book of Genesis can be divided into two sections: primitive history and practical history. Adam and Eve sinned and therefore brought evil and death into the world. Evil increased steadily in the world until there was only one family in which God found anything good. God sent the flood to wipe out evil, but delivered Noah and his family along with the animals in the ark. After the flood, humanity began again to multiply and spread throughout the world. God chose Abraham, through whom he would create a chosen people and eventually the promised Messiah. I want to touch on the seed form that I mentioned a few moments ago. Jesus Christ is the seed of the woman who will destroy Satan's power. Genesis 3, verse 15. As with Joseph, God's plan for the good of mankind through the sacrifice of his son was intended for good, even though those who crucified Jesus intended it for evil. As for practical applications, the overriding theme of Genesis is God's eternal existence and his creation of the world. There is no effort on the part of the author to defend the existence of God. He simply states that God is always, was, and will always be almighty over all. In the same way, we have confidence in the truth of Genesis despite the claims of those who would deny them. All people, regardless of culture, nationality, or language, are accountable to the Creator. But because of sin introduced into the world at the fall, we are separated from Him. But through one small nation, Israel, God's redemptive plan for mankind was revealed and made available to all. We rejoice in that plan. God created the universe, the earth, and every living being. We can trust Him to handle the concerns in our lives. God can take a hopeless situation, for example, Abraham and Sarah being childless, and do amazing things if we will simply trust and obey. Terrible and unjust things may happen in our lives, as with Joseph, but God will always bring about a greater good if we have faith in Him and His sovereign plan. Amen. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon so you can get notified when we release new videos, and hit that like button. Share this video with family and friends. Leave us a comment below on your thoughts of the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis, along with what you thought about this video.